Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Pursuit of Equity, Aligning Transition Planning from the State, District, and School Levels. My name is Ellen Cushing, and I'm the Deputy Director for the College and Career Readiness and Success Center, and I will be your moderator for today's webinar. Today's webinar is the second in a series of 4 that focus on strategies for ensuring students with disabilities are prepared for college and careers. We will be hosting additional webinars throughout the summer, including our next webinar on July 19th, which will focus on maximizing post-secondary outcomes for students with disabilities through systems alignment. And actually, Jenna right now should be sharing a registration link for that webinar if you want to register. Before we get started, we wanted to share a little bit about the CCRS Center. We are a federally funded technical assistance center that's charged with supporting state and local agencies in their college and career readiness efforts, including the supporting the implementation of policies and initiatives that are focused on the education to workforce pipeline. And we do this work by providing a range of technical assistance support to our stakeholders. Throughout today's webinar, you will have several opportunities to engage with us, and we'll pause several times to answer any questions that you might pose. But if you do have questions as presenters are sharing their information, you can engage with us by using the chat box, which should be located on the right-hand side of your screen. You can also use the raise hand function where we can unmute your line and you can ask your question then. And then finally, we'll have a post-event feedback survey where we can share and solicit some information about your experience on today's webinar. And then finally, we will be recording today's webinar and we will be posting that recording on the CCRS Center website after the event. We will also include any of the PowerPoint slides or any of the materials that are shared during today's discussion. During the webinar, we will first begin by setting the context for transition planning. We'll then go on to explore Georgia's state partnership and coordination efforts, and then do a deep dive into the Atlanta area Schools for the Deaf transition planning activities. Now we'd like to move into our first polling question just to learn a little bit more about who is on the phone and sort of what some of the things that you're most interested in learning about. So if you could just take a minute and respond to the quick poll about what you're most interested in learning today. Is it around strategies on developing interagency partnerships, transition planning for best practices, research on the impact of transition planning, or strategies to better prepare students for transition? We'll just take a minute and have you vote, and then we'll kick off with our webinar presenters. Great, thank you all for participating in the poll. It looks like about a little less than half of you are looking for some strategies to better prepare students for transition, and then about a quarter around transition planning best practices. So we'll definitely be talking about both of those, actually all 4 of these on the webinar today, but it's really helpful to sort of see what your goals are for today's webinar. Now what I'd like to do is introduce our wonderful webinar presenters for today. The first presenter that we have is Dr. Tessie Bailey, who is a Senior Technical Assistance Consultant at the American Institutes for Research. And her primary responsibilities include providing technical assistance in special education to states, districts, and institutions of higher education through her work on several national centers, including the Cedar Center, National Center for Systemic Improvement, and the National Center on Intensive Intervention. In addition, she works with several districts and states to improve specialized instruction and pre-employment transition services for students with disabilities. Our second presenter is Roddy Theobald, who is a senior researcher in the Center for Analysis of Longitudinal Data in Education Research, or CALDR, at the American Institutes for Research. And his primary responsibilities include overseeing research projects, and he recently led a project in Washington State looking at career and technical education participation and outcomes for students with disabilities. We also have a team of presenters representing the Georgia Department of Education. Our first presenter is Winna Lowe, who serves as the Senior Program Manager for the Division for Special Education Services and Supports. Before joining the Georgia Department of Education, she also served as Director of Student Services for a local education agency for 17 years, and prior to school administration, she was a classroom teacher. We also have Dr. John Pritchett, who is the Research, Technology, and Innovation Specialist for special projects related to STEM, transition, instructional practices, curriculum support, and workforce development. John is also a member of the team that provides statewide technical assistance for grades 6 through 12 on topics of articulation, career development, dual enrollment, guidance and counseling, middle and high school curriculum, non-traditional careers, technical skills assessments, and industry certification. From Georgia's Vocational Rehabilitation Agency, we have Lori Tootin and Shelley Kraft. Lori is the Director of Transition Services, and in this role, she has developed strong collaborative relationships with the Georgia Department of Education and other state and national organizations and agencies. She is responsible for ensuring pre-employment transition services under the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, and that those are delivered statewide, and she supervises the implementation of the Georgia Pathways to Work grant, known as E3, Explore, Engage, Employ. Shelley Kraft is the Assistant Director of Transition Services with Georgia's Vocational Rehabilitation Agency, and she is a certified rehabilitation counselor and licensed professional counselor. When the agency received the E3 grant, Shelley took a position as the Career Pathways Specialist with the Transition Services Unit, and in her current role, she oversees the implementation of the E3 grant. And finally, we have Helen Malone, who serves as the Department Head over Career Technical Instruction and Transition at the Atlanta Area School for the Deaf. Helen has worked in deaf education since 1999 when she joined the Atlanta Area School for the Deaf, and she is also an active member of the National Association for Career Technical Education and the Georgia Association for Career and Technical Education. Now I'd like to turn it over to our first two presenters, Tessie Bailey and Roddy Theobald, who will set the context for transition planning and its importance for students with disabilities.
Thanks, Ellen. So I'll start off, and then I'm going to pass this over to Dr. Theobald to give us a sense about what are the impact on outcomes for students with disabilities. I do want to just get us on the same page about what is IDEA transition. And when we think about IDEA transition, we're really thinking about this coordinated set of activities for students who have been found eligible under IDEA. As you'll hear from our presenters today, the focus is really on a result or an outcome. So we're taking a results-oriented process to ensure that students are having a transition from their school to their post-school living, whether they choose post-secondary education or employment outcomes, including integrated employment and vocational education. When we think about IDEA transition, there are a couple things to keep in mind. Remember that IDEA from a federal standpoint indicates that it should start before age 16, but you'll hear from our presenters today about the importance of starting this process much earlier. In fact, some states actually encourage the use of an IDEA transition plan beginning at age 14. The plan should be very individualized and based on the strengths and preferences and interests of students. And that data is then used to develop opportunities for students to develop skills for post-school employment, education, and community life. I'm going to pass this over to Dr. Theobald, who's going to share some of the research around the outcomes related to transition planning.
All right, thanks, Tessie. My job here is to motivate focus on transition planning for students with disabilities, and also talk a little bit about the research base around interventions that have been shown to improve outcomes for students with disabilities. The motivation part is relatively straightforward, and you're all familiar with statistics showing that students with disabilities lag behind their peers in terms of transition outcomes. But just to put some numbers on this, I'm presenting some research from statewide data in Washington State that shows that students with disabilities are less likely than their peers to persist and graduate from high school. If all students in this figure graduated from high school, you would see a single straight line across, but students with disabilities are more likely to drop out after 10th grade, after 11th grade, and are about 20 percentage points less likely to graduate from high school on time than their peers. These gaps show up in post-secondary outcomes as well, as students with disabilities are less likely to attend 2- or 4-year colleges. And importantly, that's true even if we're just looking at students who graduate from high school on time with a regular diploma. Even among those students with disabilities are far less likely to attend 2- and 4-year colleges. And this is true of employment outcomes as well. Students with disabilities are less likely to be employed after graduation than their peers. So these gaps in outcomes obviously lead to a real interest in what interventions can improve transition outcomes for students with disabilities. So a good place to start with any question like this is the IES What Works Clearinghouse, which is sometimes derisively called the What Doesn't Work Clearinghouse, but is essentially an overview of all interventions that have received a rigorous evaluation, usually in the form of a large-scale randomized control trial, and then whether that intervention has been shown to improve outcomes for students. In looking at the What Works Clearinghouse, the first piece of bad news is there's not a single intervention that's received a rigorous evaluation showing that it improves graduation and post-secondary outcomes specifically for students with disabilities. That's a very different thing than saying that there are no interventions that improve outcomes, but it just underscores the extent to which we need to know a lot more about what does work for transition planning for students with disabilities. Just to give an example of an intervention that has been shown to improve outcomes, there's a large body of research showing that participation in college and high school programs or dual credit programs has large impacts on post-secondary success for students in general. The bad news there is that students with disabilities tend to be dramatically underrepresented in these programs. So again, using data from Washington State, the Washington State College and the High School program is known as Running Start. And if you look at the years this program has been around, fewer than 1% of all students who participate in this program are students with disabilities, compared to around 13% of all students in the state. So students with disabilities are around 20 times less likely to participate in this intervention. So the overview here is that not only do we need more evidence about what works for students with disabilities, but we may also want to find ways to increase access for students with disabilities to interventions that have been shown to work.
And so what we do in this lack of research is we often depend on predictors. And in our previous webinar, we shared some of the data on predictors of post-school employment. 3 of those will be highlighted in today's session. So you'll hear from our presenters about including self-determination, involving CTAE in the course of study, as well as work-based learning. But most importantly is this last piece is interagency collaboration. And we think about interagency collaboration is really this purposeful, carefully designed process to promote this cross-agency, cross-program, cross-disciplinary efforts to really improve transition outcomes. And when we do that, as you'll hear from our other presenters, we see much greater coordination of services, greater efficiency and efficacy in the delivery of those transition services. And before I pass it on, I do want to share that you'll hear a number of key collaborators in our in this interagency collaboration. You'll hear about vocational rehab, including the Department of Ed, from general education, special education, and CTAE from Georgia, but many of you may know CTE. You can go to the next slide. But we also look at employers, community organizations, and post-secondary education when we really want to make sure that we're improving the outcomes for students with disabilities. I'm pleased to turn this over to my colleagues at the Georgia Department of Education, who will share how this looks in practice at the state level.
Thank you, Dr. Bailey. This is Winna Lau with the Georgia Department of Education, and we are pleased to be with you today. I'm here with Dr. John Pritchett from our CTAE division, and again, we have the A in what you normally know as CTE, but it's Career Technical Agricultural Education in the state of Georgia. Whenever we present, we always like to have the graphic of what we believe in and with the Georgia Department of Education. And if you'll notice, there's at the top, Educating Georgia's Future by graduating students who are ready to learn, ready to live, and ready to lead. We've really embedded our work in working together through our strategic plan through Student Success Imagine the Possibilities, and that's Georgia's brand for our state systemic improvement plan. We have an excellent state director, Dr. Zelphine Smith-Dixon, and she keeps us on track by making sure we always go back to the logic model and that our work is very intentional and strategic. In our original ESSET plan, we focused on 50 intensive districts out of Georgia's 213 LEAs, representing over 200,000 students with disabilities out of the state's 1.8 million students. When we examined our data moving along last fall, we noted that 37 of our 50 intensive districts that we've been working with to increase graduation rate had already met the target for FY19. And of course, that was a time of celebration, and congratulations to those LEAs. But we also have 13 that are still working toward that goal. So we've shifted that support to move the 37 to a targeted status, but to continue with the 13 districts. And we've hired 3 new program specialists from veteran specialists that had applied for the position to really have intensive technical assistance as opposed to coaching supports, and that wording is intentional, to try to make sure that we have all 50 intensive districts from the original 50 meeting that target that we had established for FY19. Georgia identified 3 main barriers, and these barriers are quite important to our partners as well through CTAE, as well as Georgia Vocational Rehabilitation Agency. We want to make sure that our students have access to the general curriculum, that there's a positive school climate, and specially designed instruction. We know these are critical factors in success of students and in moving forward toward their next stage of life with careers and employment. Our strategic focus is very simple. We want to increase graduation rate for students with disabilities. We want all students to have the opportunity to earn a regular diploma. We want to be intentional about that planning, and we don't want to plan for a certificate of performance. We want to plan for a regular diploma. And the dropout rate has to decrease. That's the silent epidemic, is the dropout rate. Results-driven accountability, that's really what we're about. So are our results really 99.09%? If you looked at our transition compliance data for FY 2017, indicator 13 data is 99.09. Well, that doesn't really mean a lot if it doesn't translate into what your graduation rate is. And the graduation rate for students with disabilities across the state for the 4-year cohort rate was 58.9%. Those numbers don't quite match. So we know that we can have compliant transition plans, but they may not be effective transition plans. And the dropout rate for students with disabilities is 5.7%, or that equates in actual numbers to around 3,500 students per year. Just take that and multiply that by 5 years, and you've lost 20,000 students in rough numbers. That's unacceptable. So we believe in effective partnerships. The Georgia Department of Education can't do this alone. One of our key partners is the Georgia Vocational Rehabilitation Agency. And within our own division, we've reached out to career technical and agricultural education and said, you're the experts in the career clusters and pathways, help us to increase the number of students with disabilities in our Georgia's dual enrollment program. We have an excellent dual enrollment program that our state legislature funds for any student meeting that criteria to go forward to technical colleges or traditional 4-year colleges that participate in the program in the state at no cost to them, not even books. So it's an incredible opportunity to get kids into a program and also to show them the success that they can have and the way to the future to make sure that we don't lose kids through dropout. We've got strategies to increase that knowledge, and we've really come together to collaborate in some very unique ways that we'll explain as we move forward today. And of course, building capacity through to meet the needs of the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act requirements. Our transition plans have got to be meaningful, they have to be intentional, and incremental steps need to be listed in the transition plan to reach toward the student's post-secondary goal. These don't need to be cookie cutter, and we certainly don't want to see plans that are the same plan year after year after year. I'd rather see specifics in there with the annual goals, outlining exactly, as I say, to mom and daddy, to the student, to the parents, exactly what the steps are next, so that nobody walks away from the table wondering, what do we do next to get the student to the goal that they want to achieve? The transition plans have to be developed as a part of the IEP. In Georgia, for many years, we had transition specialists that developed transition plans separate from the IEP process. That didn't make a lot of sense, and that's exactly what you got, were just two separate plans. The transition plan goals are simply a part of the overall individualized education program. So we want to increase student and parental involvement, and we do have a statewide student-led IEP process that we call Aspire, and we really focus on that, and we're expanding that work with the self-determination piece as well. And assistive technology, we know what the data says about assistive technology, especially with high incidence disabilities and how high the graduation rate is, extending just over 99% for high incidence disability students that received assistive technology while still in high school. So we have a tremendous focus on that as well. Transition planning has to begin early. There has to be an emphasis on middle school. Honestly, in the state of Georgia, again, a law for all students, we have to have career planning as early as first grade and have to have documentation to show that and reported to the state, and at each grade along the way. Each student has to have an individual graduation plan that is outside of the IEP for all students in Georgia by the spring of their 8th grade year. We have to put all these pieces together and not operate in silos. In talking about transition planning early, even though our state rule says that you don't have to have an actual formal transition plan in place until they're 16 in the IEP for students with disabilities, we all know kids don't drop out of school in high school. And if you think for a minute, they may drop out in high school because that's the age that they can, but honestly, they may have made that decision a long time ago from the experiences that they've had. If we don't have intentional planning to help the students determine what it is they want to accomplish and the supports in place and opportunities so that they want to stay in school, then we will lose students when they do reach that age to drop out. So that is a major focus for us. Our essential partners are Georgia Vocational Rehabilitation Agency, as well as our school guidance counselors. And school guidance counselors are also under the authority of CTAE in the state of Georgia. So they are our big partners. We have to partner in this work in order to make a successful outcome for the student. We also want to make sure we collaborate rather than duplicate. Everybody's giving career assessments. We're giving career assessments on the general ed side with school counselors. We're giving career assessments for IEPs, and GVRA's coming in and giving career assessments. How about if we share the same career assessments? Certainly having multiple assessments works sometimes, but sometimes we were actually administering the same thing. So we found a way to work together rather than continuing to subject the student to out of class time so much, and also just to share information better. So let's put all these pieces together. And I'm going to turn this over to Dr. John Pritchett.
Thank you, Anna. Yes, well, actually what we need to do is just invite everybody to come down to St. Simon's next year and hear how we do this, because what we're giving you today is really what we do in less than an hour is what we did in 2 days of training with our Georgia Vocational Rehabilitation, 4 days of training with them down there with GVRA counselors, with our school counselors, with educators, and then administrators down there. So we've got it going on, and we put a lot of effort into this. Wenna mentioned a lot about the individual graduation plan, and that is some legislation that was updated this past legislative session. I'm referencing it as Bridge 2.0. Bridge stands for Building Resourceful Individuals to Develop Georgia's Economy. And that's where we're looking at all students being able to be a functional part of our community and our employment opportunities. And so we're real interested in that area. And part of this new legislation focused in on aptitude. We have a lot of interest inventories and able to get some areas there. But if students don't realize that they have an aptitude for a different career area, then that's a concern, and that's where we really want to be able to get in. And with some of the first data that's come back from us, we've realized that we had a big divide in terms of interest and aptitude, that we have a lot of young females that have an aptitude for IT, but yet they weren't going into those areas. We had a strong aptitude for students with disabilities to be able to go into more areas than traditionally seen, and that's where we've been pushing them to be able to get into the training courses, get into our career pathways, 3 sequence courses, to be able to then complete those, earn that industry recognized credential, and be able to step into industry with their diploma and with those credentials in hand. And as a part of all this work coming together, yes, we like to brag about that 96% graduation rate in FY17. We have not received our FY18 numbers as of yet, but we are anticipating that number going even higher. And that graduation rate is for students, and that was over 130,000 students in FY17 that completed our 3 CTAE courses for a pathway. That number has gone up by more than 9% in less than 5 years. So we have really focused hard to make this number relevant and growing forward. On the next slide, we look at a lot of our data and moving forward and looking at our career technical instruction and our processes there. When we created our more than 134 pathways within our 17 career clusters, we used the national 16, but in Georgia, energy is a major industry partner, so we added a 17th career cluster. And so with our 135 pathways and 17 career clusters, academic integration is important, but industry involvement is critical. And that's where we've developed strong partnerships and relationships with our industry partners to help make sure that what we're teaching in our secondary schools will help lead students from the high school to our post-secondary partners and into industry. Or they could go from our high school straight into industry with those industry recognized credentials. We wanted to be able to make as many options and as many on-ramps and off-ramps as possible to help our students become part of our growing economy in Georgia. We've honed in on students' interests to keep them engaged, so that's where we've brought in a lot of problem-based learning, project-based learning, giving them more opportunities to get into work-based learning. Our numbers have grown in the last 5 years to more than 33,000 students participating and being involved in work-based learning in our statewide programs. We've increased the number of credentials earned from just under 5,000 back in FY12 to over 35,000 industry recognized credentials earned by students in FY17. We've engaged them and kept them going throughout all of this process. When we talk about our CTSOs and the leadership opportunities there, Georgia is, if not the #1 CTSO in terms of membership in each of the 7 nationals that we offer, and then we also have a CTI for our students with special needs here in Georgia. We are in the top 5 of membership and leadership going and opportunities. Found out this morning that Georgia again has the national president for Technology Student Association, Alex King from down in Lowndes County. Very proud of what Alex is going to be able to do and lead this coming year. So Georgia takes our leadership programs very seriously, and our CTSOs as well, and building that strong relationship between our teachers, our students, our industry partners, and our post-secondary partners. Everyone working together, it's critical to make that happen. A big piece that's also helped in that is our dual enrollment program. Wenna mentioned that our dual enrollment program is state funded and offers up some great opportunities once a student has been admitted into the post-secondary, whether that is our technical college system. Y'all may call them community colleges. In Georgia, there are technical college systems, schools. And then we also have our university system locations across the state. So students, if they're admitted into a campus location, they're able to complete a number of courses. We have over 27,000 courses on the books that students would be able to complete and earn high school credit to be able to then be used as post-secondary credit to help them in their future endeavors in terms of what they want to be able to do when they grow up. So our numbers in 4 or 5 years, they've grown from just over 11,000 to over 35,000 students enrolled in dual enrollment programs, and the number of credit hours has almost tripled to over 425,000 credit hours earned this past FY17 year. So we are doing a lot to be able to increase those numbers. When we look at even with our students with disabilities, we have a fair number of students participating in our technical college system. We've been identified of some areas that we need to improve upon, and that is going to be a goal that we're going to be working with our partners to be able to fill in some of those gaps and be able to make sure that we have a streamlined process to make it go forward. Yes, with Georgia, we still have some problems, and we have some areas that we're going to identify. So we're not all peaches and cream, but we are very committed to making sure we're going to do everything we can for all students to be able to move forward and all students to be ready to be a part of Georgia's growing economy.
Let's take just a minute to talk about our partnerships and initiatives. So, of course, you've already heard we're partners with our career technical and agricultural education, as well as career technical instruction, which that's some specialized support provided through the CTAE division, also for students with disabilities, so coming from several different angles. We also are very supportive of Inclusive Post-Secondary Education Consortia in Georgia and Project Search, although we certainly don't have a stake in Project Search, that we're not supporting it financially. Of course, many of our districts are a part of Project Search, and the results are incredible. We have had tremendous outcomes there, so we are very, very supportive of the work done through Project Search in the districts that have chosen to have Project Search. This is just a visual of the different inclusive post-secondary programs in the state. We are partners with the Inclusive Post-Secondary Program, and Georgia Vocational Rehabilitation is a big partner with the Inclusive Post-Secondary Education Program as well. Our student-led IEP process is called ASPIRE. Active student participation inspires real engagement. We have a regional specialist in every one of our regional service area centers. We have a program specialist out of the results-driven accountability unit, who is also one of our transition specialists that rounds up that support and makes sure that we expand that. We have several districts that are fully student-led IEP across every grade level, and we're wanting to expand that work. We feel like after 5 years with Aspire, that it's time to move forward and really add in an effective self-determination piece. So for the last year, we've been partnering with Dr. Michael Waymeyer out of the University of Kansas. Dr. Waymeyer has visited our state, has worked with us through different teleconferences, has provided access to all kinds of things. He has been gracious in allowing us to have some of his key PhD students come down and train in 4 different locations throughout the state, as well as in the Leadership Academy that John was referencing that we just held down at St. Simon's Island for our teachers and leaders. And so we've been receiving support through the self-determined learning module of instruction, and that's something that we hope that each district will adopt, as well as moving forward to utilize the new instrument that's just been developed and normed with the self-determination inventory. Of course, we've worked across with our higher ed partners, with our inclusive post-secondary partners, and our key partner, Georgia Voc Rehab, to make sure that we're all aligning and using the same instrument. So they also are adopting that, and again, we cross-train each other. So if the Georgia Department of Education from the Special Ed Division is adopting an initiative to make sure that we're focusing on self-determination, then our partners with Georgia Voc Rehab come into the picture as well to make sure that they mirror that work and that we're not doing things that compete with each other. All good work, but it's senseless to do separate things, but let's use and share the information together and let's cross-train. We have been big supporters of the quality indicators of exemplary transition programs needs assessment, again, through the University of Kansas for many years, and that's been a part of our as we call it, the old SPED work, as well as a part of our ESSEP work, and we will continue to promote that and utilize that information. The University of Kansas has been gracious to work with us. If we have a sample of at least 10 respondents from each of our local LEAs, then we can get district level data, and that makes a tremendous difference in how that data is used at the local level. And of course, we cross-train with our professional learning between CTAE as well as GVRA. Questions?
Great, thank you so much. I know that you've just shared a wealth of information, and we have received a couple of questions through the chat box. And so if we could just take a quick minute, maybe just give a quick response to this question. So you've shared a lot of the wonderful things that Georgia is doing. What are the biggest challenges that still exist? And is there anything that other states can learn or plan for based on what you're identifying as your next set of challenges in Georgia?
Collaboration is not the concern. The collaboration has been seamless. Thankfully, our CTAE, they are so gracious, as well as Georgia Vocational Rehabilitation Agency, and of course the Special Education Division working all together. That is not the concern. Actually, if money fixed it, I don't think that's the concern. We have, like everybody else, we have limited resources, but when we pool our resources together, it's been tremendous what we're able to do.
Time.
John says time is definitely a challenge, but part of it could also be sometimes with our dual enrollment programs. That's the thing that John was referencing. We have barriers getting the students enrolled in some of our four-year programs as well as technical college programs because of the entrance test. So we're working together, and again, we're working together as an education system to try to see if we can break that barrier down. We've got great partners through the technical college system, and I'm sure that we can accomplish that. John, do you want to jump in on that?
Yeah, it's just something that was just recently brought up at our ideas conference, and was unbeknownst to us, and so this is something that we're immediately going to address and tackle. We listen. I think that's the biggest thing, that if other states need to be able to think about something, is listen. Just because you're at the state level doesn't mean you have the answers. Let's go back and let's listen to our teachers. Let's listen to our local systems to be able to figure out what's happening and be there and ready to be flexible on this. Just because you may have an idea and this is the way it's been done doesn't mean it's the way it has to be done in the future. Listen and see what needs to be done to make the changes, because it's all about kids, and that's where we've got to focus on in any of the work that we do. It's all about children.
Great, thank you both so much. Now I think we're going to transition to our next presenters from the Georgia Vocational Rehabilitation Agency, that team of Laura and Shelley, who will discuss Georgia's Pathway to Work grant and give a little bit more detail about this collaboration.
Yes, good afternoon. We are in the historic Roosevelt Warm Springs area, and there's a bad thunderstorm going on. So if you hear some noise, I just want to go ahead and let the audience know that's what it is. I'm Lori Tootin, the Director of Transition Services, and I have with me my very extraordinary Assistant Director of Transition Services, Shelley Kraft, and she's going to start off with talking to you about our E3 grant, our Career Pathways grant.
Hi. Oh, go back. I'll go ahead and talk while Lori's getting the slides fixed. This is Shelley Kraft, and I'm the Assistant Director of Transition Services, and I also am the manager of the E3 grant. WIOA was signed into law in 2014, and this really changed the way that all VR agencies are going to be delivering services. You know, we now have to start delivering services to our students at a younger age, and we have to do what we call pre-employment transition services. In 2015, RSA posted a grant called it's the Career Pathways for Individuals with Disabilities grant, or CTAE, and Georgia decided to call it E3, Explore, Engage, and Employ. We applied and received this grant. It is a 5-year demonstration grant, and it allows us it allowed us initially, because we are going into our 4th year, it allowed us to be able to figure out how transition should really look and how should it be delivered to our students, of course, but with that collaboration with the Department of Education and our local LEAs. So after we received the grant, we brought together a very extraordinary, exciting, and enthusiastic team of VR transition counselors and other staff to talk about, if you could have the perfect transition program for your students, what would it look like? And the mural that you're looking at is kind of how that came up. We had a graphic artist come, and she captured everything while we had a conversation about what it would look like. Now, over the last 3 years, we've been collaborating in 7 pilot districts in the state of Georgia. A lot of these are pre-employment transition services, but then they lead into services that we continue to provide to our students after they come onto our caseload. it wouldn't have been possible without the collaboration with Georgia Department of Education. We've been doing it, like I said, for the last 3 years, and now we're going to be taking this and we're going to be pushing it out into the community and into all of our other school districts. We've started, the whole idea would be in the 4th year we would expand the grant. Transition services in the state of Georgia is known as E3, not just the grant anymore. And I kind of wanted to give you a little idea of what each area means. Explore allows our students the opportunity to begin to exploring the world of work, and that's kind of to help them to develop their career goals. You know, everybody can figure out what they don't want to do, but a lot of times it's figuring out what you do want to do. So with our local schools, we provide some career assessments, we do some job shadowing, we use virtual job shadow. We take our students out into the community to do tours. After they've kind of established a career goal and they're moving from, like, let's say 9th grade, 10th grade into their junior year, we kind of go into the engage phase. And in that phase, that's where we want our students and youth to actually participate in the world of work. Although we have an amazing work-based learning program here in Georgia, and our schools provide that to our students, some of our students our students with disabilities aren't able to participate in the traditional work-based learning program. So we work very closely with our employment consultant team to develop some out-of-school work-based learning. It's non-traditional, so to speak. They're weekends, summertime, just to expose our students to those fields that they may be interested in. Then next, of course, our hope will be when student graduates to either go on to a post-secondary training or enter into a certification program, and then to basically become employed. And that's where VR really starts providing a lot of intensive support, helping them find employment, and then providing supports after they become employed. And then in order, we found that, how are we going to actually get out there and meet with the LEAs in their community and have those conversations, and to take the E3 model statewide, because not only do we have to have the collaboration and support from our VR team, we have to have that collaboration and support with our local schools. And the way we do that is to be able to meet with the special education districts in their GLRS regions. And we have our senior staff, the senior management staff, as well as the transition staff, go to these meetings. It gives them an opportunity to be able to talk about some challenges that the school may be having, or the VR office may be having, also to talk about some changes within either agency that need to be addressed that may affect the way we're delivering services or may affect the way they need us to deliver services. So it's been a wonderful collaboration, and we're going to continue to do this next year and then throughout the next few years.
Thank you, Shelley. Shelley's group has done a fantastic job with marketing the E3. We do have a logo. We've developed a couple apps. We have an app called Souptastic, which anybody can download for free. And we had another app that was developed with the grant called Get That Gig. And those are both apps that interact students in career exploration and actual tasks through the app. Because of our partnership with Georgia DOE, went ahead and mentioned about sharing assessments. About 3 years ago, the Georgia DOE was in a situation in which their assessment application that they used called Georgia College 411 was going away. So they came to us, to GVRA. We had a program called Georgia Career Information System, and we entered into an MOU with Georgia DOE to provide this assessment program to all of the schools, middle and high schools, and K through 12 schools throughout the state of Georgia. We also have it in our GNET schools, and we have it also in our DJJ school system. So this is something that we're sharing together. The assessments that go into Georgia Career Information System required by the Bridge Law here in Georgia, and then what we have to do for our students on the VR side, we have access to all of this information together so that we're not duplicating services. The Career Specialist Pilot. This is really, this was a brainchild of Winna, myself, and some other folks, where we thought we really need to try to build some capacity to provide some employment transition services in the state of Georgia. There's over 200 school districts. We will never be able to provide all of the staff that's needed to deliver these services. However, Georgia is unique, or rather VR nationwide is unique in that we have a 20/80 match. So if we can raise 20% of our state dollars, we can match it with 80% from the federal government. And Georgia actually has a pot of money that is still available for us to access that. So this Career Specialist Pilot is a capacity building pilot to enter into to see if other school districts want to participate and have a dedicated position. But the GVRA, the Special Ed Department, and CTAE are working together to provide the pre-employment transition services to school districts across the state. We also have just 5 school districts that we're doing enhanced services with. The Career Specialist Pilot is working with students 9th grade up to 22 in secondary education. By law for us to give the pre-employment transition services to. These students need to be on IEPs and 504s. There's approximately 60,000 or more students that we need to be serving, and GVRA has about 800 employees in its VR program. Collaboration is essential. Dr. Pritchett had talked about the 96% graduation rate with the pathway completers in CTAE. We have to have the support of CTAE in order for our students with disabilities to be college and career ready. To meet the requirements of WIOA, GVRA, with the 80-20 model that I talked about, what we're doing is we've got Career Specialists for Transition, a new position we've created within GVRA. It's a bachelor level position. We do have an attrition rate that is probably close to 25 to 30% within our agency. State agencies are not known for paying the highest salaries, so we had to think of a way to bring in people that would stay with the agency and perform this valuable work. So career specialists in 5 school districts are working to provide pre-employment transition services, and we also have another piece with assistive technology, and I'll talk about that in just a second. Assistive technology, we have Tools for Life, and we are entering into a partnership with this group. There is also a high graduation rate for students that have access to the right assistive technology. So we're working with Tools for Life. We're going to be establishing a lending center with the hopes of getting some funds from Tools for Life that we can match at the VR level, fund the lending center, and then our pilot districts will have access to up-to-date assistive technology. The technology will be given to students in the school system, and training will be provided to the teachers so that they know how to make it work as well. As the student transitions towards graduation, GVRA can put a student on a work plan, and then we can purchase the assistive technology, give the technology back to the Linden Library, purchase them the same technology for them to go forth to do well in post-secondary or to do well while they're on their employment sites. In order for us to make this work, we have such a good relationship with the folks that have presented. We needed to have 2 state-level positions that we actually housed at the Georgia Department of Education, and they are embedded in the CTAE department and special ed department, and they're working side by side and learning everything they need to learn, and this information is passed down to the pilot, career specialists for transition and pilot sites. The pilot districts are as shown. All of them are working very closely with us. Last year, we started fairly late. We didn't get our career specialists on board like we wanted to as quickly as they did. So we're going to go into another year of working with the pilot to create that value that we were talking about. So other schools will give us a 20% state or local match, and then we can provide them with dedicated positions. Another component of pre-employment transition services, excuse me, I'm going too far ahead. please forgive me. The pre-employment transition services, these services come out of a 15% set aside with the VR grant. So we get about a $100 million grant. With the state funds that we have, we draw down enough funds that, you know, cover services for general clients and for students with disabilities. But we've set 15% of our budget aside in order to provide these services. So the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act has really provided us opportunity to give these services to students to jumpstart them into careers, into post-secondary. You can see these 5 listed here. I won't read them to you. A website that is very important to me, and I know provides a lot of information if you have questions, is WINTAC. It's WINTAC, and it's a website that you can go to that has a wealth of information about WIOA and pre-employment transition services. Our career specialists, the 2 career pathway, career specialist coordinators, that are at the state level, meet ongoing with our career specialists and discuss. This is an annual that we just held. They learn everything from dual enrollment to, they learned about the SDLMI, the SDI instrument, all of those things. We provided intensive training, and we continue to follow up with training with the school systems and the VR staff to make sure they have the most up-to-date information to help our students achieve. This is an agenda just of what we provided this last Leadership Academy. You'll see there were several different things that we focused on. And then at the very end, we brought the pieces together to show them how all of these things work to be seamless in order to affect change and increase for our students. Final thing that we're doing here in Georgia is the Pre-ETS curriculum. We don't have a real consistent curriculum for either our staff to go out and deliver or for even maybe our providers to deliver. So we have 2 academic transition teachers on board. They have been granted access to the SLDS with the Georgia Department of Education. It has a lot of CTAE curriculum on there. The 2 teachers went through all of that curriculum, developed about 80 pre-employment transition services modules. We recently trained our staff in the pilot site on how to deliver that curriculum, and over the next year we refine it, make it better. The good thing about this is that we can go into the school systems with certainty and say, this is based on your standards, so that the schools can feel comfortable that we're not going in there and providing something that does not match what they're supposed to be teaching their students. And finally, finding a common language. That's been the most important thing. We all have our own sets of acronyms, and many times these acronyms create barriers to us doing the work. So I am learning the language of Georgia DOE. We are all learning the language of VR. And when we have that familiarity with one another, then the work can be done to serve our students the way that we need to be doing. I've got some contact information on this. To reach out to any 4 of us, Winna, John, myself, and Shelley, and we'll be glad to answer any questions. I know we had a short amount of time together.
Thank you so much. Yes, thank you. We have received a couple of questions, so if we could just take a couple of minutes to respond to them. The first one is for you, Shelley and Lori. What are some challenges school districts have encountered with delivery of pre-employment services from Voc Rehab, and how were they addressed?
Well, we've really gotten into it just this past year, and I will tell you some of the barriers that we're facing are that the school systems want to be comfortable with the vendors that we're sending in. Of course, with the heightened awareness of what's going on in the schools with the gun violence, they're very concerned about that we're vetting our vendors in an appropriate manner, that we're not sending in people that would not be appropriate for their students. So we're running into some barriers with that, and developing a way to assure the schools that who we're bringing in will meet the merit of what they're expecting us to provide.
Great, thank you. And then one other question, this might be for Winna and John, or for you, Shelley and Lori, but how are LEAs using the self-determination inventory? Could you give us a little bit more of what that looks like at the local level?
This is Wenna. We just have trained our districts on the SDI because, again, if you've been following the development of that, it's really just beginning to be released for use. I think it's just still been in its norming, but we are encouraging our districts to utilize that just like they would in preparation for any IEP meeting, to make sure that that's a comprehensive part of their planning, and that there's time found either between the VR counselor or the special education case manager to include that as they prepare for any meeting. We really want to enhance that. We have a program specialist, Elise James, that will be her focus for next year, going out regionally to make sure that we spread this word across the state. Again, we had over 100 participants in our Leadership Academy, in this invitation-only Leadership Academy, which was about half VR folks and about half educators, and especially concentrating on our career specialist sites to familiarize them with SDI. We had higher ed there as well, and we also had the director from the Emory Autism Center participating, and as well as inclusive post-secondary, so that we can work across all the different the ways that we support students in Georgia. But this is a new enhancement that we will use, and they'll use that inventory piece to make sure that we're adding the self-determination component. We can't force our districts to do that, but we certainly can encourage best practice, and we have been very fortunate in Georgia that, of course, like other school districts across the nation, they want to do the best for their kids, and if we put it out there and support them and have the regional supports also, I think we'll do well with it. We'll report back to you in about a year and see where we are, and I'm sure our work won't be over there. But that's what we're doing. And again, we have been so blessed to have the partnership with Dr. Waymeyer. He's very gracious with his time, and we really would like to validate our work with our student-led IEP process, as well as enhancing it with the SDI. So I think looking down the road, we hope that there'll maybe be a research study out of that as well.
Great, thank you so much. So please continue to put your questions into the chat box, and we can answer them after our last presenter, Helen Malone, who is from the Atlanta Area School for the Deaf, and we'll discuss how all of these state initiatives that we just talked through are implemented at a local level. So Helen, take it away.
Hi everyone, I'm so happy I were able to join this webinar. First, I want to talk about this slide here. This, as educators, I believe is our goal. This is our drive. This is what keeps us going. We have to help students, all of our students, find their start. And how do we do that? And it's through a good transition program. So the first question people usually come up with is, who's responsible for transition? Well, as Wenna said earlier, it cannot start in high school. It has to start in elementary school. And Georgia has a great plan for that, and I'll briefly talk about it and show some photos from that. And secondly, how do we prepare students for transition? And to do that, it goes back to the 3 words that GVRA has embraced and moved forward with of, we have to explore, engage, and employ. And that's how we prepare the students at their different stages of life. So with elementary, as we mentioned with Wenna and John, students have exposure to the 17 career clusters. And for our students having sensory impairments, they don't get that incidental learning that a lot of hearing students get. When they go home, their parents are talking about jobs, their siblings, their cousins, friends. They don't hear that. So it's very important for our students to get this career exposure at the early ages. And then in 5th grade, the students select a career that they're interested in from all the ones that they've been exposed to, and they do a career portfolio. And when we do it, we have a day where parents come, the other students come in, and they talk to the elementary students about why they picked that particular career. And it's a nice community event in that respect of the students feeling empowered about their choice and knowledgeable about their choice. And like I said, families come and they can learn about what the students are learning about. And it's nice, and that helps with those communication topics. In middle school, we do a lot with career awareness and instruction. We follow the Georgia plan for that. And middle school, you know, the exploration, that's when students are really learning about themselves. And all of that information is gathered for the individual graduation plan. And for students with disabilities, that transition plan is written based on the IGP. So here's some examples. We use virtual job shadowing the most, and that's purchased from GVRA. And through their support, we're able to have a subscription to virtual job shadowing. And some other ones we use, the interest profilers, learning style quiz. And as John mentioned earlier regarding aptitude, we never had that opportunity in the state. And now U-Science has come on board, and we're going to roll that out this coming year so we can evaluate students' aptitudes compared to their interests and really make sure we're providing them the information that the students need to know about what all of their possibilities are. So here's an example of one we use, the Picture Interest Career Survey, and this is one we can use starting in elementary if we want to. This shows a student who struggles with understanding line drawings and what the line drawing is representing. So we have a teacher-created photo book that goes along with that. So when a student is not sure about what the picture is representing, then the photo's right there, and then they can make the selections on their own. And here are two examples from the virtual job shadowing, and students really like this. They like the pictures, it's easy to use, and that's great for them and their level of independence. So all of this information then goes into the individual graduation plan. And what we wanted an all-in-one form. So we took ideas that were from different systems. We looked at some that were developed by DOE, and we created this one. And it follows the student throughout high school. It's updated at the end of each semester so that credits, if it's a block class versus a skinny class, we can document if they failed the class or if they need to repeat it, what their EOC score was. All of that information's on here. And then at the bottom, you can see our 6 career tech pathways. And we wanted all 6 on the same form because some of our students do stay with us for 5, 6, 7 years in high school. And we wanted them to, their IGP to reflect if they took more than one pathway or not. And on the second page of it, you have the end of pathway information. We encourage all of our students to take the end of pathway assessments. Some school systems who serve students with disabilities, if a student is assessed with the Georgia alternate assessment, they're not required to take the pathway assessment. But we encourage ours to, if they want to. That's left up to an IEP team decision. And then at the bottom, you can see the additional information that can be gained. We have information regarding student needs, the transition needs. Do they have a state ID card? Do they have their permit? Have they applied for DBHDD or GVRA? And also the dual enrollment information and what their AccuPlacer results are and their ACT results. We like to keep up with that so that we can offer student-specific tutoring in an area on the AccuPlacer or the ACT that they need help with. And then at the last box, we want to make sure we're following the bridge law and make sure that all of the students are meeting that so that we don't forget they need constant exposure to all the different occupations and careers out there. So all of that information goes into the transition plan. And again, it's updated every year, sometimes twice a year if the student has met their goals on the transition plan. Our transition coordinator meets with them a lot. We have one transition coordinator that serves middle school and high school, which is almost 2/3 of our school. So I like to refer to the IGP as the roadmap and the transition plan as the itinerary. IGP has point A to point B, but the transition plan has more specifics like what do they need to pack, what is needed, what are the stops along the way, what's the time frame, those more incremental steps that are needed. And other transition activities we offer DSAT, which is Deaf Self-Advocacy Training to all students. It incorporates ADA information from GVRA. It talks about how to use a video phone appropriately, using interpreters, how to secure an interpreter for a doctor's appointment, transfer of rights, things like that that are specific to a student being deaf and developing that deaf identity. And as you can see, we have a good bit. The OSHA certification and Georgia Best certification, we want our students to have an added plus when they go to apply for jobs, whether it's a summer job or a permanent career in their path. We know that students like ours, there's already a perceived negative because of the deafness, and employers are hesitant about hiring them. But if they have their end of pathway assessment, if they have the OSHA certification, if they have their Georgia Best, that's 3 important documents that, along with their diploma, that will get them boosted up and their foot in the door quicker. Another thing that we do, as was mentioned earlier with dual enrollment, previously our students who attended college, they weren't successful, they weren't staying in college, and we want that. So when we implemented dual enrollment and really started pushing that, when the state decided, well, when the state said, okay, this is open for students, let's get them in and get them into dual enrollment, we saw a major shift with ours. In the past 3 years, we've been involved in having students in dual enrollment. 5 students right now who went through the dual enrollment program are at Gallaudet. 1 is starting his 3rd year, and the other 4 are starting their 2nd year, and they've all done great. And they've all said dual enrollment helped them be prepared. And another transition activity we had with, again, the support of GVRA is we had a summer camp fair. And we had vendors from all different camps, and we even had to turn some away because it was such last minute. But it was a good opportunity for families to connect with each other, and for families to learn about all the different camps that are available. And with the support of GVRA, 20 to 30 students are attending summer camps this summer, and that's a huge number that we've never had before. And it's been wonderful for our students. I talked to some when they finished up the STEM camp at GSU just 2 weeks ago. Now I want to talk briefly about our CTAE pathways and how that all leads to the work-based learning experiences that are so valuable for our students. We have plant and landscape systems, and students who are interested in other fields such as construction also go into this pathway. We don't have a construction pathway, but through plant and landscape systems, they can learn how to use power tools, simple building techniques. All of our pathways have industry tours, and oftentimes with the support of GVRA. The middle picture on the bottom, you can see one of the tours happening. This was in conjunction with our nutrition and food science class. They went to a garden, a local food court, co-op is the word I'm looking for, garden, and had a nice visit and learned how those 2 pathways overlap. But this is a good pathway, and we have an aquaponics program now also. The next next pathway is a very popular pathway. Here's nutrition and food science, and students work in groups or individually, and they really work on honing their skills with communication, leadership, techniques, working with the tools. The bottom picture on the last picture on the right, that is an industry tour of the Hospitality Career Expo. That was very wonderful. It was such a highlight for our students. So this pathway really does prepare, and we have a 100% pass rate on the ServSafe Food Handler EOPA for our students. And some have gone on to do restaurant internships with that. Having that EOPA certificate really opened the door for them to get in to the restaurant for employment. The other pathway, the 3rd pathway I want to talk about, is our marketing class. These students are in charge of our school store. They do inventory, they calculate profit and loss. They order all the school merchandise, not only the snacks, coffee, balloons, shirts, everything like that. They make a lot of the products, such as the school uniform shirts that we have. And they learn how to balance the books. As you can see in the top right, the students having to calculate if the money that is in the bag at the end of the day equals the money that was in there at the beginning of the day. And really balancing that. So there's a lot of math, there's a lot of rigor in with this pathway. Our audio, video, tech, and film students, they use industry-rated equipment. They write, produce, edit, everything, and push out the school news throughout the school. They video and live stream performances, such as sporting events, class projects. They live streamed our graduation that happened in May. GVRA helped us secure a tour of Floyd County Productions, and they are an Atlanta production company that they created the Archer cartoon. I'm not that familiar with it, but one of the head editors had previously seen one of the films that a student had edited, and he came out and spoke to the student and commented on his skills as an editor, and the student was elated, and more importantly, he felt validated. This is a student who struggles with CP. He struggles with communication because of his CP, but he is a good editor, and having that interaction with business and industry was very important for him. This is one of our newer pathways. We rolled it out this year, graphics design and communication. It appeals to many students because it covers so much in it. Photography, 3D printing. You can see students using what's called a 3Doodle. It's a 3D pen. And we have an engraver cutter. We have a wide format printer. And students going into this pathway, it really opens a lot of doors for them as far as different ways they want to go with their career in this. And they can go into just a locally run business making shirts if that's what they want to do, or they can go into a technical college or NTID, National Technical Institute for the Deaf. So that's really good. Then we are starting Internet of Things this year for coding, programming, robotics, drone use. This is going to really ramp up a lot of our STEM, the mission for us to become STEM certified and get our students ready for this kind of world. CTAE is very involved, our our career technical student organization. And as John mentioned, I think John and Wyndham both mentioned earlier about CTI, and GVRA supports our students' involvement in CTI, and they go to conferences and leadership competitions, and it's a great organization. Here's some pictures from our CTI events and CTSO. And here's our CTSO this past year. It's the largest group on campus. It's the largest club. And we're very proud of that, and everyone's a full member. They do everything for the meetings. And here's some more pictures from our CTSO. Work-based learning, we try and match the students' interest, aptitude, and their CTAE pathway. And I do want to mention, I know I'm running very short on time, but the young man with the military group, he really, his dream is to join the military, but he can't because he has a hearing loss. So we were able to provide him a work-based learning internship at a local recruiting office, just to give him that experience. And he also worked at the Marriott Evergreen in Stone Mountain. And because of his work-based learning experience, he was hired full-time, and he's there doing event setup. And he trains our other work-based learning students, and there he is in the red shirt as a full-time employee, training one of our other students. So then I'm going to end with this quote. I believe that for all of our students, we want this to happen. We want all of our students to change the world. And I believe that they can. Our students are only limited because they don't know the possibilities yet. And they'll feed the world because we will have them ready for college and career and life. So that's all I wanted to say about it.
Thank you so much. It was wonderful to hear all of the wonderful examples that you just shared. We do have time for one question that has come through, and I opened it up to all of our presenters, but the question is, are there any data points regarding transition outcomes for correctional students who return to local schools, and they also have disability on their transition outcomes? So I'm not sure who that should go to, but I open it up to all of the presenters.
I don't know that we have that information available.
I mean, we work with our correctional facilities.
We do work with, Department of Justice and correctional facilities, and we might be able to secure some of that data, but I don't think that that's something that we track specifically. Currently.
Okay. All right. Well, that was our key question that came through in that last part of the session. So I just want to take a minute and thank all of our presenters from Georgia, Tessie and Roddy as well. Thank you for taking the time. I just wanted to quickly remind you of the 2 upcoming webinars that we'll have July 19th and then another one in August with the date to be determined. But if you want to go to the registration link that was shared earlier, we can have you sign up, and then as the registration link is available, we will email out to you all some information about how to register. So thank you, everyone. Looking forward to connecting with you all on July 19th again. Have a wonderful rest of the day.
Thank you.